This time I'm going to talk about Scoutmaster and the CowScout data entry system. Scoutmaster is a utility used to help manage your team scouts and help catch errors in your scouting data. But first we'll talk a little bit about why Scoutmaster was created. When CowScout was first created in 2010, we used paper sheets and had one student responsible for entering all the data into CowScout. This gave us a second set of eyes which helped catch errors and missing data on the scouting sheets. When we phased out paper sheets in the 2011 version of CowScout, we noticed that during the San Diego Regional that our scouting data had obvious errors, such as a team scoring more tubes than they picked up off the ground or from the human player, or a team getting first place in the minibot race without actually ever deploying a minibot. So between the San Diego and Silicon Valley regionals, we changed the way CowScout accepts scouting data. Instead of taking the scout's data and entering it into the statistics database, we put it all into a temporary part of the database and wrote something called TouchWatcher, which would analyze the data and notify the lead scout of any errors found in the data. The lead scout then had to approve any of the information that went into the statistics database. For the 2012 version of CowScout, Scoutmaster does everything TouchWatcher did and more. We took it a step further and made it so it helps assign your scouts which team to watch. So when a scout goes to the data entry form, CowScout actually looks at which matches have been scouted and which matches have been played and figures out which team a scout should watch and notifies them. To begin using Scoutmaster, first select the event in which you are attending. In this case, I'll select the San Diego Regional. When you get to the event page, you'll notice that there's a section in the middle of the screen called Team 1538 Stats. This gives me the option to either scout a match or go to Scoutmaster. When I go to Scoutmaster, it brings up a screen that looks like this. And this tells me which information is in the temporary database. So for example, right now, the only match that's being watched is match number 5. The person that's watching that match is watching Team 3491. The user is John Jack, which is in the user account. And it also tells me the status of the match. So in this case, when it says scouting, it means the match is still in progress and the user hasn't submitted the data into the database. It also gives me the total error count. Another cool thing about Scoutmaster is it lets you see what the scout is entering. So if I click on View, it actually brings up the information sheet for that match. And as the scout is entering information, it will actually update. Now you'll notice something, that the first update tells me that the scout has said that the team's attempted 1 uber tube and they've scored 2 high, and it puts these red X's next to it. What the red X's mean is that there's actually errors in the data. For example, it's actually impossible for someone to score 2 uber tubes high if they've only attempted 1. Now if they lower that number down to just 1, then the red X's go away and the data is error-free. So I want to go back to the event page and I want to scout a match. So I'm going to go down to Scout Matches. When I click on this, it brings up the touch-friendly version of the data entry form. And as you can see, it already assigns me match 5 and team 3794. So that's going to be the team number that I'm going to watch in match number 5. Now when I go back to Scoutmaster, it shows another user's watching team 3794 in match number 5. And it also shows that it is also in matches being scouted. Now, if I go back to the data entry form and I begin filling in information, let's say this team scored 1 uber tube and they scored 2 up high and they scored 3 tubes high and 1 in the middle, and I ignore the floor load and the lane load, and I'll say that they dropped some tubes. When I go back to Scoutmaster, it actually lists the errors. So when I go and view this data in Scoutmaster, it actually shows me which fields have errors associated with them. So for example, you can't have scored 4 tubes on the rack if you haven't picked any up off the floor from the lane. And likewise, you can't score 2 uber tubes high if you've only attempted 1. Now, if I go back to my data entry form and I remedy this, so I'm going to lower this down to 0. I'm going to say that this team picked up 5 tubes from the floor and that they actually only scored 1 uber tube high, and I go back to the Scoutmaster form, give it a second to update. Now it shows that the data is error-free. So I'm going to go back to the Scoutmaster form and it'll show that this is error-free. There we go. Now, I'm going to submit my data or save it, and now that it's saved, it'll assign me a new team. Now because I don't have a bunch of people watching matches, it just assigns me another team in match number 5, 2102. Now, if I go to the Scoutmaster form it shows that data is now awaiting approval. I could view the data, make sure everything looks okay. If I want, I can actually go in and edit the match. So if there is an error in the data, I can go through and say, yeah, they actually didn't score 2 Uber tubes high, they actually scored just 1, et cetera, et cetera. And you can go to update, and it'll actually update the data. Now, if I want to put it into the live database, all I do is I hit approve. It asks me for confirmation to say, hey, are you sure you want to approve this data? I say yes. And now the data is out of the temporary database and into the live database. So that means that when you go and look for statistics for the 2011 San Diego Regional, it will actually show up as a statistic. So that concludes this demonstration of Scoutmaster for the 2012 version of CowScout.